So welcome, Terry.
Well, Karen, thanks for having me on. I'm really looking forward to talking with you today.
Oh, me too. You're a very interesting man and very, well, how can I say it? You've had some adversity, but you've got a wonderful, positive attitude about it. So, I think it's a great thing to share with people about. I often say, let's not wait for adversity to become the great person we were born to be, and I'm not saying you did, but it's sometimes we just leave it too late, that adversity tends to be the deciding factor about whether we, jump up. Now, you didn't do that. So anyway, you've got a lot to talk about. So thank you for joining me. I'm really, really pleased to have you. And
Well, thank you.
you're in Denver, so we just had a conversation for anyone listening that Australia's a day ahead. So I've just been telling Terry that his day tomorrow should be a fantastic day because it's wonderful here, and I've just been filling holes in the driveway. So that's what Terry's got to look forward to. No.
Can't wait. Can't wait.
Anyway, it's great to have you. So you are the founder of, I'll just run through a couple of things of Motivational Check. So I want to talk about that as when we get to it. But you also did many jobs, and you talk about reinventing yourself, because, and I really love that because a lot of people will get stuck in, but this is all I know how to do. This is a job I've done. The only job I've ever done, it's all I ever know. And I love the fact that you've said, well, I'm going to have to get another job, and therefore I'm going to have to find some new skills. And we often doubt our ability to do that, but I believe we've all got it in us to gain the new skills. So a number of jobs, college basketball player and coach, marketing manager of Wendy's in America, just a stack of other jobs, but the one that interests me is then you went to join the Cincinnati Police Department and became a SWAT, hostage negotiator. I have to say that slow, or you never know what'll come out, which sounds fascinating because I do want to dig into that. But then you've also since I think 2000 and now I've got to check my 2005 or something. Anyway, you've had. No, 2012, diagnosed with a melanoma under your foot, and you've been fighting that. Plus, there's also been some amputations and things. You just it seems to me like there's just, something after the next, but you're still bloody shining, and you've written a book, so we'll get to that too. So I think before I even ask you about SWAT, there's something I want to say. Is that we are very good at judging a book. We're very good at assuming we know a person's life, and a lot of us can be very critical. That person, blah, blah, blah. But we don't know anything about their lives. We don't. And I reckon everyone's fighting some kind of a struggle, and everyone's been through something, and we just be kind to each other. But anyway, do you need to say anything? Because I've just been rattling on.
No. I think you're absolutely right. I mean, we tend to look at life, from our perspective. And if we tend to shift that into the perception of other people, then all of a sudden things change for us. Because you're right, we don't know. And I don't know what you've been through. I've been on your site. I've read, you lost your sister and things like that. But I don't know anything else other than that. Yep. And so, yes, I think you hit the nail on the head with that word. Why can't we just be kind to each other? Why do we have to try to be tough or strong or I'm better than you? Why can't we just care about each other? And I've been asked several times on podcasts, how do you want to be remembered? And my response is always, one, I don't want to be remembered. I'm not going to be remembered. 100 years from now, nobody's going to remember I was here. But what I want to do is connect with other people. I think that's so important. I think that's the reason we're here. It really is. I've unfortunately had all this cancer journey that I've read a lot of books on near-death experiences. And however that goes for people, there seems to be an underlying question that is asked of these people. And first of all, it's like, whether it's God, do you love me? Yes. And then the second thing is, do you love my children? Do we love each other? Do we care about each other? Are we kind to each other? Keeping commandments and doing all this stuff is great. But what God wants to know is, do you love me? And do you love the people I put on this earth with you?
Yeah.
And if you think about it from that perspective, kindness is such an important part of what we should be practicing every day.
Yeah. 100%. Oh, you said it really good. All these, call it God's children or whatever, all these people that we're on this planet with. And it's like the planet is big, it is expansive, it is huge. But when you think about how many people are on the planet, it's actually quite crowded, and if we are sharing this space with people, we've got to coexist, and you can't coexist by cutting everyone down. You've got to coexist by, we're all connected. I love that you talk about connection, because we are all connected in some way. All our energy, is all intertwined with each other. And if we criticize, we're mean to somebody else, we're being mean to ourselves. So maybe some people feel like they need self-punishment. I don't know, but I think it's easier to be kind. I think it's way, way easier to be kind. But anyway, so
you do, and you get what you sow, as you know. You
Absolutely.
Get what you sow. If you sow kindness, you're going to get it back. If you sow hatred and fear, you're going to get that back as well. The universe has kind of a way of working things out.
I know people who don't believe in that, but I have seen it unfold that many times. I have no doubts. Sometimes karma takes a little long to get to some people, but
it does.
But anyway, it does happen. Now, when I'm so interested, because you had, a lot of different jobs, and all very good jobs, and high skilled, that you needed to develop skills. What was it that made you join the Cincinnati Police Department? Why did you go? That's sort of a big shift. Where did you?
Yeah, so there is a backstory, and if you understand the backstory, it makes a little bit more sense. My paternal grandfather was a Chicago police officer, Chicago, one of the larger cities in the United States, from 1924 to 1954, and was actually shot in the line of duty with his own gun. It was not a serious injury, was shot in the ankle, but my dad, who was an infant at the time, always remembered the stories my grandmother told of that knock on the door of, Mrs. Tucker, grab your son, come with us, your husband's been shot.
Oh.
And so when I expressed an interest in going into law enforcement, my dad was, absolutely not. You're going to college, you're going to major in business, you're going to get out, get a great job, get married, have 2.4 kids, and live happily ever after. But that's the life my father wanted me to lead. That wasn't the life I felt was my purpose. And so when I graduated from college, my father was dying of cancer. And so I had probably the first major choice of my adult life. I could have said, sorry, Dad, I know you're dying, but I'm going to go blaze my own trail. Or out of love and respect for you, I will do what you want me to do. Now, understanding that backstory, my first two jobs were in business and healthcare, because that's what my father wanted me to do. And then I sort of joke, I did what every good son did. I waited till my father passed away, and then I followed my own dreams and got into law enforcement.
Yeah. Wow. Some people, I get that, and I get the love and respect, and I get as particularly if someone's dying, you just want them to live out their life. But there are a lot of people who live their parents' dream forever. They don't ever actually go and do what they want to do, because no, it'll just upset my parents and that kind of stuff. And I actually do think there's we have a responsibility as an adult to take ownership of that, and to say to our parents, you know what, I really respect what you want, and I understand why you want that, but I want you to respect me, and this is my life. So I'm glad you got to do it anyway, but it's a shame your dad died in that process. But when actually going back, your grandfather, you said in Chicago in 1924 to 54, whatever it was, tell me, did he arrest Al Capone? I've got to know.
He did not arrest Al Capone, but I can tell you that in the cupboard behind me, he had two scrapbooks, and I have the police photographs from the St. Valentine's Day massacre, where Capone sent people dressed up as police and wiped out a rival gang in a garage on the south side of Chicago.
Wow.
So my grandfather had a little bit not direct interaction with
Yeah.
him, but definitely had. He was in Chicago as a policeman during that time.
Yeah.
You couldn't escape something like that.
Wow. Wow. It's a whole other world, isn't it? It just you think of Chicago back then, all you think is gangsters. Like that's all you think. Wow.
Yeah, it really was. I mean, I also have in his scrapbooks are letters. Oh shoot, the guy's name just went out of my head. John Dillinger was another huge gangster,
Yeah.
and Hoover, who was director of the Federal Bureau of Investigation, sent this man and Melvin Purvis, that was his name, sent Melvin Purvis to Chicago to get Dillinger. And so he ran the Chicago FBI office. And I have letters sent on behalf of my grandfather to the chief saying, hey, could you pay these officers a little bit more money? Because back then there were no unions or anything like that. It was you paid, however long you worked, you got so much money.
Yeah.
And so I've got letters from Purvis, who was a fairly influential, fairly high up individual in the FBI, and there have been movies made about Dillinger, and Purvis is in it. So just kind of interesting to relive that time. I mean, my grandfather was shot in 1933, so you can imagine, trauma medicine in 1933 versus trauma medicine in 2024, probably a whole lot different.
I think that's absolutely fascinating. Fascinating, and you'll have to start a museum. You're as bad as me. I've got collections of all those sorts. I haven't got that kind of stuff, but all the things like that, and I love it. So when you joined the police department, did you have an interest? You became a SWAT hostage negotiator. Did you go into the police department with some kind of a thought in your head for in the future I want to be in the SWAT team? Like, did you ever? No? How did it get to that?
I really didn't. I didn't, I started out like everybody else, went through the academy, spent 4.5 years in a marked car in uniform, running a beat, answering radio runs. And usually SWAT departments on police departments are usually the best officers with the best training and the best equipment. And I've always wanted to be part of the best in my life. So when there was an opening for a negotiator, I thought, what the heck? I'll put in for it and see if I can get it. And I was lucky enough to get on with the team. And I realized when I got on just how much I didn't know, and had a tremendous learning curve, but eventually got there.
Wow. How long were you in the police force before you went to the SWAT team?
About 5 years.
Yeah. And then how long were you in the SWAT team before you ended up leaving that?
4.5 years.
Yeah. Yeah. So, and we'll get to that cancer bit in a minute. I'm so curious about the SWAT team because, when you've got these elite forces, and then that's what it is. People are always curious. People are like, what do they do? That kind of stuff. What was your greatest takeaway from being in that sort of elite team?
I guess one of the things that I learned very early on, and I never thought about this, but they gave us a formula when I started, and the formula was 7-38-55. And that formula had to do with how we communicate with each other, not necessarily police officers or SWAT, but how we all communicate with each other. So 7% of how we communicate with each other are the words that we use. Yeah. And think about how you agonize. I mean, did I say the right thing, or did I write the correct thing? Yep. That's only 7% of how your message is communicated. 38% is the tone of voice that you use with that message. And then 55% of how a message is communicated is our body language and facial expressions. Yep. So as negotiators, if somebody's barricaded in a room with a gun, I'm not in that room with them. I am a lot of times blocks away, or, at least on the other side of the door with the tactical team surrounding me. And so I don't have the luxury of saying something and see the person kind of, roll their eyes like, oh, what an idiot. I can't believe he said that. So we had to figure things out based on certainly what people were saying, but also what they weren't saying and how they were saying it. And we used what we call, we use tactical empathy. So in other words, help me understand why we're here. Help me understand what's going on. Not necessarily agree. I mean, if I'm negotiating with a guy who just murdered 3 people, I'm not going to be, oh yeah, I totally get it. You should have done, but it's helped me to understand that, because by helping me understand by that empathy builds trust, and trust allows me to change behavior. And the other thing we used was how and what questions. We stayed away from why questions
Yeah.
because why questions sound accusatory. Well,
Yeah.
Karen, why did you do that? Oh, wait a minute. Is Terry, suggesting I did something wrong?
Yeah.
I can get to the same information by saying, well, what got us to this point, Karen?
Yeah. Yeah.
Things like that. So how and what questions. And the other thing how and what questions do is they engage you to help me get you out safely. So you may say something and I may say, well, Karen, how am I supposed to do that? Now, what I've done is thrown the ball back into your court. And now you're thinking, well, how's he going to do that? Yeah, that's exactly what I want you to do. I want you to help me get you out safely.
Yeah. And also what I'm seeing you doing there is you're unlocking their amygdala hijack and you're re-engaging their neocortex. You're getting them back to rational thinking so that they can start to plan properly and execute properly.
Yeah. And that's, I mean, you hit the nail on the head. We used to describe what we did. And when we were young, we always, all went to the park and played on the teeter-totter or the seesaw. And so when we started negotiating with somebody, their emotional brain was way up in the air and their rational brain was way down on the ground. Yeah. And over the course of several hours, and these negotiations usually took hours and hours, you got that teeter-totter to equilibrium, and then eventually, hopefully, got that rational brain up in the air and the emotional brain down on the ground. Because we all make better decisions for ourselves when we use our rational brain as opposed to our emotional brain.
Yeah. Do you still use that now? Like I can clearly hear that you teach that, like you say that, you know all those things. Do you find that it's just like a sixth sense to you? Do you know when you're talking with people? And don't get me wrong, because I also train a lot of that stuff, and I know for a fact that there are times when I don't do it. There are times when I'm so emotionally attached to the situation, that I am emotionally fueled, even though I know I should not be there, But so we're all human, and we're all gonna do that. But generally speaking, do you try and use that a lot? Is it sort of a second nature to you that to do a lot of those things now?
It is. I mean, I find myself using a lot more how and what questions, or if I find myself wanting to say, well, why did you do that? I always catch, it's like, oh, wait a minute, don't say that. Go this way with it. So yeah, and you're absolutely right. I mean, my wife and I have one daughter, and she was young when I was going through all this. And you're right. You'd get home and you're like, I've got all this training, all this experience, and it totally goes out the window when he does something stupid, and now all of a sudden I'm flying off the handle, and it's like, oh my God, you know better than this. You've been trained better than this. But when it's like you say, when the emotion comes in, when you love somebody, or they frustrate you, or you're exhausted or whatever, a lot of that goes out the window. So it's a conscious thing. You have to kind of think about what you're going to say. And the other thing I'll say is, one of the things they told us, the most important thing that we had as negotiators was our voice. And we were one to slow down. And I tend to talk very fast, as you can probably tell.
Me too. Yeah.
And the other thing was, use that curious voice in a curious way, end questions with, oh, really? Something like that gets that person talking, because that's what you're trying to do. The more they talk, the more they burn off that emotional energy, and to the point where they get that rational brain engaged. Initially when you start in a negotiation, it's all them yelling and screaming and a lot of times, Karen, we had no idea why we were there. We had no idea what caused this. And you're like we were talking before, well, let's pick a rabbit hole and go down there and see where we go. And, sometimes it would be like, no, you idiot. That's not what we're talking about. Okay, fine. Get out of that rabbit hole. Let's pick another one then.
Yeah.
Because if people don't trust you, and that's what this was all about. If people don't trust you, they're not going to open up to you. And we would spend hours sometimes over here talking about something when the real problem was over here, but they didn't trust us enough to talk about the problem yet.
Did you ever lose anybody? Did it ever fail?
Yes. About 90% of the time, we were successful with getting the person out. 10% of the time. And I mean, we never lost a hostage, but we, I mean, if this person literally was a homicide suspect and knew that they were surrounded, they weren't going to get out of this, and they knew they were going to spend the rest of their life in prison, they decided sometimes to end their life, to use that gun on themselves. That happened a few times. And I'm going to say something that's going to sound real cruel, but I never lost any sleep over that. And the reason I didn't was because I had great training. I worked with great people, and I 100% knew that I did everything I possibly could to try to get that person out safely. Any loss of life is bad. I don't care what it is. But at the end of the day, they're going to decide, are you going to come out? Is the tactical team going to have to go in and get you? Are you going to end your life? How this ends depends on you, but I'm going to try to do everything I can to make it end safely and peacefully for you.
Yeah. I love, no, I that doesn't sound bad, actually, because I think that we can't control other people's actions. We can't, and we can do our absolute best under the circumstances that we've got and the environment that we're in. We can't always do magic, but no, I like that you because I was wondering if you had lost anyone, what trauma did that cause you? But I love that you're saying that. Don't get me wrong, I know you would have. You say you didn't lose sleep, but you still would have gone, damn. I wish that had ended differently. Like there's still a sense of humanity in there that's like, damn, you silly bugger. I just wish you didn't do that. But I was also curious when you said it about losing any hostages, and that would be a whole different story. That would be I'm losing sleep over that, because it's an innocent person who wasn't in control of the situation. But I'm so glad you said we didn't lose a hostage. So, wow. Well, okay, I love it. What's one more question on this, because I'm so curious. Sort of a psychological question is, what's the most common reason people take hostages? Oh,
Nobody
put you on the spot.
No, I mean, at least from our perspective. And again, we were a city police department. I mean, this wasn't like, there's a guy by the name of Chris Voss, who was the head negotiator for the FBI. And he was the guy that, if you were a missionary in the Philippines and you got kidnapped by, a militant group or a militia group, he would be the guy that would go in and get you out. I mean, I don't think anybody that I dealt with ever wanted to take a hostage. It wasn't, I mean, they just got in a bad situation and their plan went sideways and all of a sudden they had one. I'll give you a kind of an atypical funny story. This was a guy who had taken a hostage. The hostage was his wife. And I happened to be working that night. I was a sergeant. I got to the car. I was running. I was in uniform, so I got there quickly. And I talked to the uniform guys. I'm like, "Do you have them on the phone?" It's like, "Yes, we do." Well, let me talk to them. So we started talking. And as I said, you don't talk about solutions to this usually for hours down the road. Coming out, putting the gun down. But I just had a feeling with this guy. And I said to the uniform guy, I said, "What's the deal with him?" It's like, he's drunk. He's barricaded himself in his house. He's got a gun, and this hostage is his wife. I'm like, okay. So I said to him, eventually, like 15 minutes into the conversation, I just had a gut feeling. I said, "What would it take for you to come out?" And there was this long pause. And he said, "Give me a beer." And I was like, "If I gave you a beer, do I have your word you would come out?" He said, "Do I have your word I could drink it?" And I said, "Yes, you have my word that you could drink it." And so I gave $5. He said, "Then I'll come out." So I gave $5 to one of the officers. I go down to the store, buy a beer. Tactical team put the beer on the front porch. And then I called them back and I said, "Hey, your beer's on the front porch, but you don't get it until your wife comes out. You put the gun down and you come out with your hands up." Once again, he says to me, "Do I have your word I can drink it?" I said, "You absolutely have my word." All of a sudden, the front door comes flying open. Here comes his wife with her hands up. Here he comes with his hands up. We handcuff him, let him drink his beer, and off to jail he went. And the reason I tell you that story, because it is totally atypical, never happened that quickly, is we never lied to people. People would say to us, "Hey, look, I'll come out, but you got to promise me I'm not going to go to jail." And we would have to say, "I'm sorry, but when you come out, you are going to go to jail." And then we would try to deflect the conversation to something more pleasing. And the reason we did that was because there was a very good chance, and this happened several times, that a year from now, 2 years from now, 3 years from now, we would be right back negotiating with that person because whatever the problem was didn't go away. And 3 years from now, it set them off again. And if they ever felt you lied to me, then we were totally done and you were going to have to bring in another negotiator.
Yeah. And it could be far more fatal the next time, like far more catastrophic. Yeah.
Absolutely.
There's a, now I really can't remember when you said about a beer, there was some hijack. And I'm thinking Norwegian, but I can't remember. But there was a hijack situation, and all they wanted was beer. I can't remember what it was now. And as you said it triggered that memory in my mind. And they just wanted beer, so they said, "Yes, sure, you can have beer." Of course, they arrested them when they got off the plane. Right. They just wanted beer. It's like you don't realize the power of beer, do we?
You don't. I mean, but there were things like people would say, I need a fix. I need a rock of cocaine. We're like, yeah, you're not getting that. I mean, there were certain things we were not going to give you, but I mean, a beer, yeah, sure, we'll give you a beer if you'll come out. So sure.
And you know what? The truth is, underneath all this, most of them probably just want a bloody hug and somebody to say, I see you and I care about you. That's probably the deepest part for most people. You don't do this stuff unless there's a whole lot of pain underneath there. You just don't.
Well, that's just go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, go.
No, I was going to say it, and this was real important to it. We would have people that would trying to collect intelligence in terms of like, say, why are we here? What happened? So as the primary, you might get a note that says, don't talk about his mother, because his mother was the thing that set him off. And so, you have to be real cognizant. And we would ask people, I would come right out and ask, if I was negotiating with you, like, if we had this feeling, Karen, are you going to kill yourself? And people will be like, oh my God, I can't believe you said that, because you're planting that idea in his or her mind. No, we're not. We're absolutely not doing it. But what we are doing it, and you just said it, we just opened the door that if that person is considering suicide, that, oh my God, somebody cares. Somebody wants to listen. Somebody wants to hear my story. So whenever I get the chance to talk about suicide, don't ever feel, because I've been on scenes where somebody's killed themselves and they're like, oh yeah, he was giving stuff away, or he was talking about dying, and it was like, and you didn't think that was something you needed to confront him with? Yeah. Well, I didn't want to put the idea in his mind. You're not going to put the idea in their mind. If they're thinking of doing it, they're going to do it whether you were there or not. But if you give them an out, they might just take it. They might just walk through that door and not kill themselves. So if you think somebody's going to kill themselves or harm themselves, don't be afraid to ask them. Put it right in their face. Are you thinking of doing this? Because if they're not, they're going to tell you you're an idiot. And if they are, you may have just saved their life.
Yeah. 100%. And if you don't have the skills to do that, or if you don't have the confidence to do that, even going right back to the start of our conversation, just being kind, because I've heard people say, I've had this teenager. Well, he was a teenager, but when came back to me, he was an adult. He said, "Karen, you saved my life." And I said, "Why? When?" And he said, "When I was just a student," he said, "you just sat me down and sat with me on the couch and said, 'Are you okay?' And then we talked about stuff, and it was just stuff." And he said, "Just because you sat down with me, it was that quality time." And so even if we don't have the skills to negotiate or to talk about that, or we think it's over our head, just seeing just giving someone some kindness or just showing them, I care about you. Hey, how you going? How's your day? I'm smiling at you. I'm saying good morning. I'm just showing some kinds of, you're a valuable human being. You're worthy. You're worthy of my 1 minute. That it's we don't do it enough. I think we just don't do enough. So, and I find it so fascinating, and not in a morbid kind of way. It's a kind of I'm fascinated by psychology. I'm fascinated by what drives people to become so desperate and in such despair. It's because I think it's sad, really, really sad. But anyway, did you now you said you were in there for I think, what are we going, 9.5 years or something like that in the police force, in the SWAT team. Now in 2012 you were diagnosed with cancer. I'm going to say it, you say it, because I'm going to get it wrong.
The type of acrolitiginous melanoma.
I would have said that, but I didn't want to say it in case I got it wrong. And so so you were still in the police force when this was diagnosed?
No, actually, I had gotten out. I had a school security consulting business at the time, and I was coaching girls' high school basketball.
Yeah. And so this melanoma was on the sole of your foot. So how did you find it, or what made you think that needed checking?
So I had a callus break open on the bottom of my foot, right below my third toe, and it was during basketball season. And so, initially I didn't think much of it because as a coach, you're on your feet a lot. But after a few weeks of it not healing, I made an appointment and went to see a podiatrist, a foot doctor friend of mine. And he took an x-ray and he said, Terry, I think you have a cyst in there and I can cut it out. And he did. And he showed it to me. It was just a little gelatin sac with some white fat in it, no dark spots, no blood, nothing that gave either one of us concern. So he said, you know what, just to be safe, I'll send it off to pathology and have it looked at. 2 weeks later, I received the call from him that we all dread in our lives. And as I said, he was a friend of mine. And the more difficulty he was having explaining to me what was going on, the more frightened I was becoming, until finally he just laid it out for me. He said, Terry, I've been a doctor for 25 years, and I have never seen the form of cancer that you have. You have this incredibly rare form of melanoma. And he recommended I go to a very prestigious cancer hospital here in the States. And when I did, after they cut it out of the bottom of my foot and took all the lymph nodes out of my groin, I remember they said to me, if you get a miracle, you might live 5 years, but more than likely you're going to be dead in 2 years.
Oh, God.
I said, well, okay, you just gave me a death sentence. Maybe I can try to turn that death sentence into a life sentence. And that's what I've been trying to do for the last, 12 years now.
I was going to say, so that 2 years would have been up 10 years ago.
Yep.
And you're still with us. So holy hell. So that's interesting. It looks like a callus. I think we're all taught to, if we see a dark spot, worry about that. But you sort of hit the nail on the head there, is about that. Even when we think it's, well, of course I've got a callus on my foot, I'm always on my feet. Anything that's a little off, to get it checked.
It was painful. It was like, okay, this isn't right. I know something's going on here. But like I said, when you're on your feet a lot, and, I certainly was on my feet a lot as a police officer, it was like, but then you just get to a point where you're like, something's not right here. It needs to be checked out. And I am very much, very in tune with my body, have a physical every year. I'm not one of these people that like, no, there can't be anything wrong. No, whatever it is, let's go get it checked out. So I guess it was a good thing I did.
So you had the surgery, and then you had, or two surgeries. We had your groin, your lymph nodes taken out. And did that not get it? Like, because you're saying, that you've had this battle for 12 years. Where else is it? Like, what's happened to, why didn't it just sort of finish there? What was the problem?
Well, one of the things is, once cancer metastasizes to your lymph nodes, think of your lymph nodes as kind of like the sewer system of your body. It takes everything away. It takes fluid away, bad cells, dead cells, everything. The problem is it circulates around your entire body. And one of the things my oncologist told me years later was, wherever the cancer was when it was diagnosed, it was already there. So the tumors I have in my lungs now, they were there 12 years ago. So I have this surgery, cut it out. And they're like, the reason it was a death sentence is because they had absolutely nothing to offer me other than surgery. There were no drugs, no therapies they could offer. And so they put me on a weekly injection of a drug called interferon, basically, as my oncologist used to say, to kick the can down the road. We're just trying to buy you as much time as we can. The side effects of the interferon, sometimes I think they were worse than the cancer, were that it gave me severe flu-like symptoms for 2 to 3 days every week after each injection. And I took those weekly injections for almost 5 years. So imagine having the flu, and a bad case of the flu, every week for 5 years. And like I said, that wasn't a cure. That was just, we're trying to buy you time. Eventually, the interferon became so toxic to my body that I ended up in the intensive care unit with a body temperature of 108 degrees, which is usually not compatible with being alive.
Yeah.
Somehow I survived that. but I had to stop the interferon. And the cancer came back almost immediately in the exact same spot on the bottom of my foot. That was 2017. I had to have my foot amputated 2018, works its way up my leg 2019, 2 more surgeries. And then in 2020, an undiagnosed tumor kind of in my ankle area grew large enough that it broke my leg. It fractured my tibia. And that's also when I found out I had tumors in my lungs. And so my only recourse right in the middle of the COVID pandemic was to have my left leg amputated above the knee. And like I said, I found out I had these tumors in my lungs, and I've been being treated for them since 2000. And I mean, literally, I go every week. I'm on a clinical trial drug. I spend a week at the hospital getting treated. I get 2 weeks off, and then I do it all over again. And I've been doing that for 3 years.
Wow. When you were, you seem like the drug that you're on now is not making you feel like so sick, as the interferon. But when you were on that interferon, were you that 5 years of that constant flu? Did you ever want to give up? Like, because that's hard. That's hard, yakka.
Yeah, many times. I mean, I kind of felt there was sort of 2 camps. There was, I'm living, and then there was the camp of, I'm not dying. And during that interferon time, I felt I was in that not dying camp. I'm not participating. I mean, if you would have asked me what my goals were, I would have said, I'm just going to try to wake up tomorrow morning. That was literally, I mean, sometimes winning the day was, I'm going to get out of bed and I'm going to make it to the couch where I'm going to spend the day and then go back to bed. I mean, I've had the flu. We've all had the flu, but it was like, oh my God, I was so sick of being sick that I literally prayed to die. I never contemplated suicide, but I literally asked God, I'm like, look, I'm not participating here. I'm not giving anything in life. I'm just dying is what I'm doing. Just take me out of this. Well, obviously he didn't, but he gave me the strength to literally, it was day to day. My life was literally day to day for 5 years. I didn't work. I mean, sometimes a good day was I could put a load of laundry in the washing machine to help my wife out or something like that. If I was feeling really good, I might go ride the exercise bike. But yes, I wanted out of that. I'm like, this sucks. I mean, this is just not, people shouldn't have to live like this.
So now you've got, and I agree. I'm the same. I would never contemplate suicide, but I can imagine myself lying there going, oh, fucking hell, enough. I can't do this. Like, just for God's sake, just let me die, because I reckon I've got to pray. I pray that never happens. But, when you, like, now that you're on this other treatment, you got those 2 weeks that you're out of hospital, how do you feel? Like, do you feel like well enough to be enjoying life? Because there's a difference between just living life and surviving life. I feel okay, but do you feel like you're really enjoying life most of those 2 weeks?
So I mentioned, I guess let me kind of go back a little bit to answer that question. I mentioned my dad was dying when I got out of college, and this was back in the excuse me, the 1980s. My dad had end-stage breast cancer, which for a man, they didn't really know how to treat a man back in the 1980s. And they told him to go home and die. And he lived another 3.5 years. And I believe he did because he had a purpose. He had something to do. He was in real estate. He loved real estate. He actually worked up till 2 weeks before he died. And I sort of tucked that in the back of my mind and said, okay, when it's my turn in the barrel, I need to have that purpose. I need to have something to do. And, being an amputee, being in a wheelchair, I mean, I don't get out very much. I mean, my excitement is to go to the hospital, I mean, yeah, a lot of fun. And I mean, that's my excitement. I mean, when our daughter got married, I was able to walk her down the aisle with my prosthetic leg. But I have an above the knee amputation, which is much different than a below the knee amputation, much harder. Your thigh, your quads and your hamstrings, their whole job is to move your lower leg. Well, when you don't have a lower leg, they got nothing to do. So they atrophy. And so you walk with your hip and your butt muscles. And it's very uncomfortable. very unnatural. And there's a whole lot of other things that I won't go into that you have to deal with. And so, you get to a point where what's your purpose? And so people were like, you need to tell your story. And so I made the brilliant business decision. Never take business advice from me. I made the brilliant business decision to start a motivational speaking business just as COVID hit. And like so many other people, everything shut down. Nothing virtual, nothing in person. And so somebody reached out to me and said, would you like to be a guest on my podcast? And I said, sure. What's a podcast? I had no idea what a podcast was. And they explained it to me. And I said, yeah, okay, I'll do it. And honestly, God, Karen, I had Post-it notes all around the camera. They asked me a question. I'd lean in. I'd read one of the Post-it notes. I was horrible. I was terrible. I provided no value whatsoever to this person's audience, but I liked it. And I started to think, the first time we ever do anything in life, the first time you drove a car, the first time you cooked a meal, the first time you studied algebra, were you any good at it? I know I wasn't.
No.
So it's a matter of, and I remember I was talking to my publisher one day and I said, Scott, I listen to every podcast I've ever been on. And I'm probably at least around 700 podcasts that I've been on all around. And I said, listen to everyone, because I want to have a better story. I want to see how many times I say or huh. And I want to get better at it. And he said, no, Terry, it's not about getting good. It's just about not sucking. I said, well, thanks for the title of my next book. Just don't suck, but no, that's not the case. He said, I want to be good because I want to provide value and I want the host to feel that it was time well spent. So like I said, that was my purpose. That's what I do during those 2 weeks. And it gives me energy. Yeah. Because my wife and I always have this discussion. You need to rest. You need to get your blood counts up. You need to do it. And I always tell her, I get plenty of rest when I'm dead. Right now, this is what I'm supposed to do. And it is my purpose and it gives me energy.
I love it. And I totally agree with you because I teach about confidence. And I say confidence is a threefold. You've got to have courage. You've got to have action. You've got to take action. You've got to practice. So, take courageous action and practice it. Just keep practicing. And same with exactly what you said, driving a car. I always use the example of using a smartphone. I remember I resisted like hell when they first came out. My sister showed me hers and I said, what? You can get the internet on your phone? No, bullshit. I'm not doing that. That's ridiculous. I'm going to tie myself to my desk and my computer with the, the line connected to the house. And I was so resistant, but it is the same, because it's that overwhelming. I don't know how to do this, and then we fear failing, so we don't do it. But we just got to take that courageous action and just keep practicing and just keep practicing. Now you started then, so you've called it now Motivational Check, and I did the same as you. I started my business right in bloody COVID, perfect timing. But anyway, it is successful, so lucky. But Motivational Check, so. Is that like, why did you feel you could have just kept going on podcasts, and just sort of said, well, I'm Terry and here I am. That with that sort of having that business name and the website and you being you, and you sort of got some branding, around this. Why did you go, right, I have to make it stand out? Was this your need to be great, or was it a need to, I'm trying to think what I'm trying to say. Was it a need to kind of find a way to pull people in who need motivation, who need some inspiration, who need to hear your story to get themselves out of there? I think I went the long way around that, but anyway.
No, I knew where you were going with it. It's never been, and this is going to sound terrible. It's never been about me. It really hasn't. And I say that because of this. You can't tell this from looking at me, but I'm 6'8" tall, and I went to college on a basketball scholarship. And so I started playing basketball when I was 9 years old and played all the way up until I graduated from college when I was 21. And one of the most important things that I learned from team sports, and for me, it was sports. I think it can be whatever team you're on, is the importance of being part of something that's bigger than yourself. Yeah. You realize on a team that if you don't do your job, not only do you let yourself down, but you let your teammates down, your coaches down, your fans down, your parents down, etc. And if you think about it, the biggest team game that we all play is this game of life.
Yeah.
So Motivational Check, the name came from when I was in the police academy, when I was in the Cincinnati Police Academy. And our defensive tactics instructor gave us that phrase. So if we were doing something, and we did some crazy things in the police academy, we would run to this apartment building that had this huge fountain in it, and we would do push-ups and sit-ups in like 6 inches of water. And I mean, we did all kinds of crazy things. But if you got to a point where you were just done, you were defeated, you were beaten, you could yell out motivational check, and the rest of the class would yell 84. We were the 84th recruit class, just to let people know that, hey, we're all hurting, but we're all in this together. And when I was looking for a name for it, motivational check just seemed to keep popping up. And I mean, it doesn't mean anything to anybody else. It means something to me based on that story. But that's why I called the company Motivational Check.
But even when you say it doesn't mean anything to anyone else, it means something to you. You're the driver of it, do you know? And I know you're saying, well, it's not about me, but you used to, it wouldn't be about anyone if you weren't there. Like it's important. And so as the founder of something, or as the person who is leading something, even if it's servant leadership, it's still, there's still going to be a driver. Like there's still going to be something that ignites your spark so that you still go out and do that. So I love that story. I love it. It might not mean anything to anyone else, but it gets you up every single day. And like you said, having purpose is the number one driver to staying alive, living a decent life, feeling like you're valuable and I've got purpose, I've got meaning in my life. And even if you're, and when you say even helping other people, you still benefit. Like a lot of people say, why should I get myself to that person? Why should I suffer? Why should I blah, blah, blah? Because every time you do help someone else, you actually help yourself. Like it's that karma coming back, and, it's a whole cycle. So by default,
and sometimes you don't even know what you don't know. In a lot of ways. I'll tell you another quick story. I had a nurse that was, when I first met her, she was about 25 years old, so a relatively young nurse, but was in training on the unit where I get my infusions. And about 6 months later, she was taking care of me by herself. And she came into the room and she said, Terry, I've got a story I want to tell you, but I'm a little uncomfortable telling it to you. And Karen, I didn't know how to respond to that. And it was like, well, it sounds like I might enjoy hearing it. I hope you decide you want to tell me. And so she's in and out the next couple of hours, and then finally comes in, sits down, and says, all right, here's the story. She said, when I first met you, I was going to get out of nursing. I'd had a very good friend of mine die. I was in a really dark place. I talked to my family. I was going to quit nursing, and I was going to go to work for Amazon. And she said, and then I met you. And I see what you go through. I see the side effects of your treatment. And then I went out and I read your story. I went back and, to 2012 and read everything about you. And she said, when I finished reading, I knew I was where I was supposed to be.
Wow.
Now, if she would have never told me that story, I would have had no idea that my life, and I'm not doing anything special, I'm just living my life, that my life has a positive impact on her. So, people that are out there listening to us that think, nobody cares, but I guarantee you there's somebody out there that is watching how you courageously handle your adversity and would give almost anything they have to walk 5 minutes in your shoes.
That is just so true. And it's a different story. It's not my adversity, but this podcast, some days I do some of them on my own. I just, start recording and prattle on about something. And I kind of think, I don't know what to talk about today. Or maybe I should talk, I don't know, maybe I'll talk about such and such. And I'm not saying that I do it without caring, but sometimes I'm like, nobody wants to hear, no one wants to hear me just prattle on about crap, but it's that bullshit we tell ourselves, because so many people have said to me, and I listen to your podcast every single week. You're my, this is not the right words, but my saving grace. You're the thing I look forward to every single week. And then yesterday I was running a training session, and the woman who was running it, I didn't say anything about my podcast. At the very end, she said, and Karen hasn't told you, but she also has a podcast, and she said, and she does these great sessions where she just talks by herself. She has wonderful guests, but she also talks by herself. And she said there's always little gems, and it makes a difference to me, And another guy I know who listens has got some real challenges, and and there are days I feel like, I don't even know if anyone's listening, but what's the point, that sort of thing. But that's not true, because I do know people listening. But if it's a very important thing just to keep check of yourself, because there are so many people watching and listening who, for something that might seem insignificant to you, or just matter of fact, or I'm just going about my business, it's potentially changing someone's life. And someone's always watching. So always someone. So yeah, I know.
It goes back to the connectedness we were talking about a minute ago. We're all connected. Yep.
And we are all connected. That's I know some people say, oh, how can we all be connected? You're there, but it's our energy joins the minute we're together. Or sometimes we can even not even know each other and impact that butterfly effect. It impacts every decision we make. Determines how our life turns out, but it also determines the impact we have on so many people that we'll never ever meet. And I might say something to somebody, and then they say something to someone. And I've talked about this on the podcast before. But if we can impact 10,000, 100,000, 1 million people, and all we've even spoken to is only 10, so there's a huge power in ripple effect, massive power. So.
Yes.
With you're going to say something. I keep cutting you off.
No, I was going to say there was a basketball coach here in the United States when I was growing up, had a great quote, and it went like this: "A careful person I want to be, a little person follows me. Yes. I dare not go astray for fear they may go the same way." So wow. I think that kind of encapsulates what we've just been talking about.
I love that. Yeah. And I often see kids too that have now become adults, and I think, God, I knew you when you were a kid. You were such a little mischief maker, and I know I growled at you at one point, get down off there, you buddy. And now I look at them as adults, and I think, oh, and so one thing that I try to remember is that inside every little kid is an adult, and that you're shaping that adult, and it's. Yeah, not always easy to remember, but it's a really important thing. So you've determined these 4 truths that what are they?
Yeah, I have them here on a Post-it note, so I see them constantly. They're constantly reinforced in my mind. And so they're one sentence each. First one is control your mind, or your mind is going to control you. Yeah. Second one, embrace the pain and the difficulty that we all experience in life, and use that pain and difficulty to make you a stronger and more resilient individual. Yep. The third one I look at is kind of a legacy type of truth, and it's this: what you leave behind is what you weave in the hearts of other people. Yep. And then the fourth one, I think, is pretty self-explanatory: as long as you don't quit, you can never be defeated. And I call these 4 truths kind of the bedrock of my soul. They're just a good place, I think, to start to try to build a quality life off of.
Yep. They're a great foundation. I reckon they're bloody wonderful. And I think many people are lacking a foundation. If we have a foundation, then we can just continually, we know there's a safety net. We know there's a safety net when we start to jiggle a bit. I love that. And you've written the book, let me get it right: Sustainable Excellence, 10 Principles to Leading Your Uncommon and Extraordinary Life. So I know it's about 10 principles, but what else is it about? What can people expect to read it when they read it?
Well, I guess it's probably easier for me to tell you the story about how the book came to be. It was really born out of 2 conversations I had. One was with a former player that I had coached in high school, who had moved to the area in Colorado, where my wife and I live with her fiance. And the 4 of us had dinner one night. And I remember saying to her after dinner that I was excited that she was living close and I could watch her find and live her purpose. And she got real quiet for a while. And then she looked at me and she said, well, Coach, what do you think my purpose is? I said, I have absolutely no idea what your purpose is, but that's what your life should be about. Finding the reason you were put on the face of this earth, because there is a reason, using your unique gifts and talents and living that reason. So that was one conversation. And then I had a young man in college who reached out to me on social media, and he asked me what I thought were the most important things that he should learn, not to just be successful in his job or in business, but to be successful in life. And Karen, I didn't want to give him the, get up early, work hard, help out. I didn't want to give him sort of the cliches that we all know. Wanted to see if I could go deeper with him. So I was taking notes, and I kind of had these 10 thoughts, these 10 ideas, these 10 principles. And so I sent them to him. And then I stepped back and I was like, well, I got a life story that fits underneath that principle, or I know somebody whose life emulates this principle. So literally during the months that I was healing after I had my leg amputated, I sat down at the computer every day and I built stories, and there were real stories about real people underneath each of the principles. And that's how the book came to be.
That's fantastic. That's fantastic. Yeah. You know what? There's so many things and so when you're talking about leaving a legacy, that's there. That's there now, and it's even if you pass on, and I don't want that. I think you're bringing a lot to the world, but we're all going to go at some point. Yeah. And to have a book is such a it never goes. Even long after you, that book still remains. And who knows how long Amazon will last, and who knows how long hard books will end up being audio books, will end up being something else. But let's the hope is that the story keeps carrying on. The story just keeps passing down, so that. And even if you impact only one more generation, if not two, then you hope for that ripple effect, to move down. I'm with you. I have this thing, and I say it all the time. It's not my quote, someone else's quote, and I can't think of the person, but I want to plant the tree of the shade I'll never get to sit under. I think that's so important. And I have met many people say to me, "You're bloody crackers. I want to sit under the tree." And I'm like, I'll find another tree to sit under. I just want to plant that one.
Yeah, exactly. And then again, that goes back to being part of something that's bigger than yourself. Exactly. You plant that tree grows, it provides shade for somebody, and you'll never see it. And it's kind of the reason, because my nurses are always asking me, why do you keep coming here, for this treatment? Why do you keep coming every 3? Why do you keep putting yourself through all the, the side effects of this? And I certainly it's helping me. I mean, it's very much a selfish reason. But the other part of it is maybe 5 years from now, 10 years from now, based on the data that the doctors are gleaning from my blood work and my scans, they'll perfect this drug to a point where it'll save somebody's life. And they'll get to be with their family, for another 20 or 30 years. Yeah. And I won't even be here. But that's another part of being part of something that's bigger than yourself.
I agree. Yep. I love that. Hopefully it does save you in the meantime, but I absolutely agree with that, Yeah. I love that. I love this talk. I love this. Where can people find you? Because I'm sure people are going to be interested and go, wow, I want to know more about Terry. So, because we could have talked about your cat, we didn't, but I'm joking. But where can they find you?
So I have a blog kind of / website called Motivational Check. Every day I put up a thought for the day. With that thought comes a question about how maybe you could apply it in your life. I have recommendations for books to read, videos to watch. You can leave me a message. That's all at motivationalcheck.com.
Fantastic. Well, I'll put that in the show notes so people can just click on it and come to you. I've absolutely loved this chat, Terry. I'm very grateful for you, for us connecting, and very grateful for you sharing your story. So I hope that drug works, and I hope we're still seeing you 10, 20 years time. So thank you very much.
I would love it.
Yeah.
And Karen, thanks for having me on. I really enjoyed talking with you.
Yeah, me too. Enjoyed talking to you. Thank you so much, Terry. See ya.
Bye-bye.